People like the energy they have, and they have no intention of doing without it. If we re-engineered our energy system in a way that led even to 6 months of serious disruption in its availability, governments would fall.
The world of energy is transcendent and very complex. We believe that building on knowledge and in-depth analysis in this sector is required.
The long-term benefits of the early adoption of policies that boost the transition to a carbon-free economy more than offset, on aggregate at least, the short-term cost of this transition. In other words, there are clear benefits in acting early.
All know that supply of energy at affordable prices is questioned, and hence the work I think that we've been doing is even more important and even more relevant.
Global supply chains are not as resilient as we thought, and probably it's the first crisis that we're facing in this energy transition.
And I think the politicians and policymakers haven't devoted enough time to the system's problem. Like, how do you make sure there's going to be a continuous flow of gas, which we will need for, I would guess, at least 25, 30 years.
All is in the hands of technology. And of course, technology, R&D in particular, it's something that we can accelerate.
15 years ago, the new technologies that might make this transition possible really did not exist, or if they did exist, were so expensive they weren't credible. But actually, the one great achievement of the last 15 years is the collapse in cost, particularly of renewables, wind and solar power. We do have the technologies now. Now we have to roll them out in a mass scale. That requires a combination of government policies, regulations, price incentives, which are market compatible.
We know what is the best instrument to be used, which is taxation here. This is an externality, and the best way to internalize the externality is through taxation. But the crucial thing here, in particular for the political process, is that we need to pay attention to this transition cost, that there will be losers.
Poor people and poor countries didn't cause the problem. There are almost 1 billion people who don't have access to electricity today in the world. They obviously didn't cause the problem. Right now, the developed world, all of us, Europe, North America, Japan and so forth, generate a little under 30% of total emissions. The rest is the emerging world.
And it's very important that we accept that. And at the same time that we are even in a position to compensate the losers so that they are supportive of those policies.
If we're going to do this, we are clearly going to have to provide a completely different incentive and regulatory environment.
We as supervisors, we are trying to force banks so that they incorporate climate-related risk into their traditional methodologies.
And the difficulty is that the risks are completely different if you bet the transition won't happen and it does, or you bet the transition will happen and it doesn't.
So I guess here what is absolutely crucial is transparency related to what is green and what is brown. Second, you would also need transparency on regulation. At least the transition risk will depend crucially on what policymakers will do.
The point here is how capital markets can actually be oriented by policymakers in a way that those investments have the natural risk of any investment, okay, so things may go wrong, but how can we somehow reduce the uncertainty that comes from today perhaps unknown future regulation?
We need commitments for 2030 because that's really relevant to business. A commitment for 2050 is pretty remote for most businesses.
One good example that maybe is worth mimicking is the recent agreement on corporate taxation. And there are clear targets, there are clear objectives.
So you need commitments for 2030, which you have now got with the EU and in the UK, but lots of countries really haven't got there.